Hi there. Welcome to my weekly live stream. I'm Christine Weber. I love to support mature yoga teachers getting their wisdom out there into the world. And today I want to tell you a fish story. It's a fish story that I hope makes sense in terms of the topic, the context, to give a little context. Um, I've been writing about and thinking about reductivism, mechanism, or mechanistic scientific materialistic thinking, I guess you could say, in the context of teaching yoga. And I'm going to be publishing a blog on that tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll be finished. Um, so I wanted to just kind of give you some of the thoughts that I've been having and why we get stuck in mechanistic thinking as yoga teachers. So I came to yoga practice. I'm sure many of you did too, because it's holistic, and I loved how it made my body feel, but I also really loved how it made my mind feel. And I saw it as a way. I use it, and I still use it as a way that I could feel expressive. Like it made me feel connected to my higher self, connected to spirit. So I wanted to do all of those things in my yoga teaching. But then as I started to get trained as a yoga teacher in the 90s and stuff, what was really popular then was 90s and early 2000s. It was all about biomechanics, so it was all like you stretch this muscle and you have to stretch this muscle properly and this muscle to be able to do that pose. It was just purely biomechanics and kind of just physically oriented, with maybe a little sprinkle of a mantra or something on top, but it wasn't really there. That wasn't really the focus. So as when I came to the practice, I came because of mental health challenges, but that's not what was happening. I wasn't learning about that in my trainings. Um, and I think when we consider why that's the case, then it helps us to be able to get out of the trap. So that's where the fish story comes in. I'll tell it in a moment. But first of all, why think about it for yourself. Like, why does yoga keep going back to being something mechanistic? So even though in the 90s and the early 2000s was all about sort of your biomechanics, then what started to shift, I started to see the shift into fascia in the 2000s, late 2000s. And so everybody was talking about fascia, which is great. Fascia it's great. It's a step in the right direction. And then there was like all the ball rolling stuff coming out, and the rollers and all that stuff. Like, you got to break up your fascia. So that was a step, but it still was like going back to thinking about your body like it's a machine, and that you're a machine. And then I saw another little shift, and that went more to somatics, which also is really good because it brings the mind into the conversation, which is fantastic. But again, still like not really a framework for deeply understanding who we are ontologically as human beings, and then being able to use yoga practice to address who we are as human beings, mind, body, spirit, right? So there just wasn't really there. Why do we keep going back to that? Like, why do we keep thinking of ourselves like a car that's broken that needs to be fixed? Well, that's why this is where the fish story comes in. So there are two fish swimming along. There's a codfish and a catfish, and the catfish says to the codfish, "Hey, do you know that monkfish?" And the codfish is like, who are you talking about? He's like, that monk, that weird fish. Look, he's down there. And they look down on the bottom of the ocean, and there's a little monkfish, and he's living in a little cave, and he's got this nice front yard of white pebbles, and he rakes them into nice little neat rows every day, and he plants in his garden, and he's just kind of sitting there peacefully. And the codfish says to the catfish, "Oh yeah, that guy is really weird." And the catfish says, "Yeah." And then suddenly the monkfish looks up and sees the codfish and the the catfish, and he says to them, "Hey fellas, good morning. How's the water?" And the catfish looks at the codfish and he says, "You see what I mean? What the heck is water?" In this story, the water is our thinking. And we have been gifted if you like, gifted with this thinking from 400 years of scientific materialism, starting with Francis Bacon and Descartes, who taught that everything about us can be understood through the microscope and through the scientific lens. So, what we don't see our fish water, and we come to you, and we're all in it, by the way. It's not like anybody is free from the fish water. Like, that's the way we have been acculturated, trained, educated in our cultures, especially in Western cultures. This is the way we're trained, this is the way we're educated, and increasingly so in Eastern cultures. So we come to the teaching of yoga with the fish water of scientific materialism, which says, like, my body is a machine with pulleys and levers, and I can fix it with these yoga practice thing that I learned over there. And we take the yoga practices and we shove them into our fish water thinking, instead of being like, oh, this is the way I think. And if I could do something about, if I could clean up the pollution in the water, maybe I could think more clearly. And then maybe I would use yoga in a different way. Now, yoga has a completely different water that it swims in, at least traditionally, than Western scientific materialism. And the water that yoga swims in is holism. It's looking at the human being not as a machine that's broken, but as a whole structure, as a whole being that it needs healing on a mind, body, spirit level, not just mechanistically. My husband and I were in Phoenix last year, and he saw all these driverless cars around. And he was like so excited. He's like, we got to take a driverless car. So we took the driverless car, it's like an Uber thing, and, went from point A to point B. And I was like, okay, can I not do that again? Because it was terrifying. But then I started, as I've been working on this blog, I've been thinking about those driverless cars, because that's how we think about human beings. We are this machine with some intelligence on top that, moves ourselves around. We're not machines, though, at all. We're much more like a seed than we are, or a tree than we are a machine. But, we grow from a seed. We communicate with other human beings. We're part of social networks. We can heal. We can change. We have self-healing capacity. We're so different than a machine, but our fish water is still highly mechanistic. And so it's really easy to fall into the sort of, yoga for stretching my hamstrings, yoga for my vagus nerve. That's huge right now. Yoga for, somatic health or whatever. And all those things are good. I'm not disparaging any of them. They're all great. Yoga's great, however you do it, but we can have a much more holistic approach. We can actually address more of the problems of human beings, because even, like, think about your hamstrings. Your hamstrings aren't tight just because they're tight for no reason, because they're a car and you've been driving around for 50 years and they got tighter and you need to replace your hamstring. Like, that is not the way it works. Your hamstrings are also tight because of whatever's going on in your mind, whatever is happening in your life is creating that. So we have to step back and step out of that mechanistic thinking and see that it's there to be able to change it and to be able to truly teach yoga. So I hope this is helpful, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Also, right now, we're in this period for the next 3 days of sharing my brand new breathwork course. So if you're interested in my breathwork course, you can check it out. I'll put the link below. And let me know what other topics you want me to talk about. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week.